Hello and welcome to Indies on Indie. I'm your host, Patrick Poe, and this is my podcast. You know, you're probably subscribed. And if you're not, welcome for the first time ever. I bet you're new because we've got a really cool guest today. Today's a big deal in my mind for the podcast. It's a guest we've been working to get scheduled for like a year now, honestly. We were going to do it last winter before the shutdown happened. We had been trying to schedule it and get it figured out with both of our schedules being freelance artists. And then there was a shutdown. And then there was the podcast hiatus that I did. And then we did it. We did it over Zoom. And I'm so glad we did do it because it was an amazing conversation. This is a long episode. And honestly, I could have probably talked to him for another 2 hours and it would be incredible. And I loved talking to him. We talked about such interesting things. There's so much good knowledge and advice and just, he's fun to talk to. I hope I continue to just chat with him throughout forever. So that's exciting. And I'm glad you get to hear it and get to hear all this knowledge. This is our first episode that's like full recorded from a Zoom interview. The past couple episodes, those guys are podcasters themselves, and so they've got their own audio setup they were recording and then they sent to me. This is the first one that is fully me recording the interviewer through Zoom to my Zoom. That's confusing to you unless you know that Zoom is a company that also makes recorders, a different company called Zoom. So I'm sorry I went down that rabbit hole. That was wow. Okay, let's just ignore that bit. But yeah, so it's the first one that I recorded through Zoom. And I think that this is probably what the podcast will sound like for a little bit as we come back from this pandemic and I keep talking to people virtually. This is what it'll sound like for a bit, and it's fine. And I think you'll enjoy it. I will also let you know that he does have children. He is a father. And a great one. I got to see his kid for a bit on the Zoom call, and that was really adorable. And because of that, you're going to hear them. You can hear them throughout the interview kind of tramping about in the house. And then at one point, one of them comes and becomes a part of the interview, and it's wonderful. And you're going to get to experience that in a bit too. So have fun with that. That's going to be really exciting. All right. What do I want to talk to you about today? Got a couple of things to talk to you about. The first thing I think we should talk about is that who I talked to today is a horror guy. And so because of that, I watched a bunch of horror. And if you guys know me, that's not what I watch at all. And it wasn't a terrible experience for me. I quite enjoyed what I watched actually. And I've been kind of getting into the genre in general. And I talked to him about it that I watched Halloween for the first time recently. I made Lolo sit down and watch it, and I'd never seen it, and that's what we did on Halloween. It was really cute. We watched that, and then I actually really liked it, and I ended up watching Halloween 2 and Halloween 3 even. I didn't really like Halloween 3. I know that's probably divisive. It wasn't for me. But I've been enjoying them, and I'm thinking about watching more Halloween movies, maybe venturing out into some other horror films. So we'll see how that goes. I'll keep you updated if I watch any more horror films. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but we'll maybe I'll stay open. It might happen. I've also talking about watching new films. I'm very excited. I have a new podcast to announce. Me and Lolo. If you know IX Productions, that's the production company that creates this. It's also the production company that is me and my wife Lola Loren. We are IX Film Productions. We are producing a new podcast. It's going to be the two of us. It's called First Timers Movie Club. It's going to be the two of us showing each other films that are quintessential movie buff films. Like the films that you should have seen theoretically. The movies that everyone's watched or that everyone thinks are great. We're going to watch those movies and we're going to react to them. We're not reviewing them. We're just giving our reaction to these films. So that's our new podcast, First Timers Movie Club. It's not even a thing that you can go subscribe to yet, but it'll come out in 1 week. So we'll start be doing Indies on Indie will come out every other Friday, and then First Timers Movie Club will be on those opposite Fridays. So you can go find that, and we'll post about it on our Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Follow us in all those places. And with that change, I'm announcing that the podcast will be leaving SoundCloud, and we're actually moving over to Spreaker. It shouldn't affect most of you if you're subscribed on iTunes or if you're subscribed on Google or Stitcher or whatever. But if you are a SoundCloud subscriber, new episodes of Indies on Indie, they're going to be on Spreaker. So you're going to need to move over to Spreaker or to a different podcast platform besides SoundCloud. It will all be going somewhere else. So no more SoundCloud. Everything else should be fine. Don't worry if you're on something else. But no more SoundCloud. Going to Spreaker because we've got the new podcast, First Timers Movie Club. Super excited about it. Also, we've got the holidays coming up. I just want to talk about that for a minute. I hope that you guys had a good Thanksgiving, a good safe Thanksgiving. I know that the holidays are going to be weird this year. I just want to say that the holidays are going to be different. You're not going to be able to see as much family as you want. You're not going to be able to see as many friends, do the regular holiday parties. But the way I'm looking at it right now, and the way I'd like for you to look at it maybe to try to stay more optimistic and happy during this time, is that because you can't do anything, just take the pressure of having to do anything off and just enjoy the day. Just have a fun day, pressure free. That's what we did for Thanksgiving, and it was an absolute blast. And I'm actually pretty excited for Christmas this year because there's pretty much no pressure, and that's nice. So remove the pressure, have a good holiday season. There should be a new episode of the podcast coming out right around the holidays. Make sure you listen to the new pod. I'm so excited for you to hear this episode today. I talked to filmmaker Patrick Rea. So let's get going. Here's me and Patrick Rea.
Hello?
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty well. How are you doing?
Oh, it's been crazy.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. In the scope of things, it's going insane.
Yeah,
but
right. Exactly. If you're looking at today as a Monday, it was pretty good.
That's exactly. So when you asked how I was doing today, for a day, I did pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I've been, it's a balancing act right now of working on my own stuff and then getting my 7-year-old daughter through her second grade homework. It's like this, because she's been in virtual second grade since September.
Oh my gosh.
And now the entire school district is virtual. So it's like I'm writing and storyboarding and then doing math, and it's like this. It's an interesting.
And you're
balance.
learning 7th grade again,
second grade.
Second grade. Sorry.
Which actually, I gotta say, they're doing some stuff where I'm like, I've never seen math done this way. I'm like, how do you? It's just very strange that the
new math is odd.
Yeah,
it doesn't work in my brain.
Yeah,
and that's makes it hard. I feel like when you're supposed to teach it because.
Right. Well, and it's just one of those things where today we, the teachers have maybe 2 Zoom calls with the students a day, at the most.
That's not bad. I've heard worse.
No, I mean the problem with it is though, because then they just load up all the homework. So then each student has an iPad, and you're like, how much homework does my kid have today? And then it's just 7 assignments that you have to get done between now, and most of it she can do on her own. But there's some stuff where you're just like, if I'm not watching her, she's watching Netflix or she's messing around with Minecraft or something else, and so you just have to kind of supervise and make sure that they get through the process. Otherwise, they're just not getting there. And then you get emails from the teacher saying, we haven't gotten this 5 assignments from your daughter, and you're like, oh, crap, it's my fault.
I think that's what I need. I need someone to just come watch me to make sure I'm not watching Netflix or playing Minecraft. I need that.
Right. No, I mean, and I think that, that goes for everybody right now. And, I've worked from home for 10 years now. And, but it's different.
It's so different.
Because my wife is home too. She hasn't worked at her office since April. They sent everybody home in April and they haven't been back. So she's working at home. And then I've got my 2 daughters, and it's madness. And I'm just trying to get my own stuff done at the same time and not lose my mind. And
I mean, I was a freelance artist full time for 4 years, and then literally January of 2020, I decided that I was going to start doing just like a part-time gig so I could maybe save up some money to maybe leave Kansas,
Sure.
maybe do a bigger project. I don't know what, but I wanted to just have some
Sure.
extra.
Yeah.
And so for some reason though, when everything shut down, like I'd been at a job for 2 months, but it felt different being home because I wasn't sure what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what, I mean, like I've been doing stand up, I'm an actor, like I'm a writer, I'm a director, but like I was like, well, when are we going to film again? How are we going to film?
Right.
What should I write? Why does like do I need should I write everything with masks? Like what is the world? And so it's weird now, isn't it?
It's this weird thing. It was weird before when I always tell people when you work for yourself, you don't know when to stop, maybe because you're like, oh, it's 5 o'clock. Everybody who has a normal 9 to 5, they're like, I'm done at 5.
Yeah.
And me, I'm like still tinkering around on things at 8 p.m. And now it's even weirder because it's just like everybody's just kind of in this weird like, did I do enough work today? Or like, it's a strange feeling. And so
and also part of that day that you used to have is now taken up with being your child's teacher.
Right. That's the thing. So then you're like, okay, now there's going to be overflow into like the evening because I'm working on my own stuff. And it's like, well, then am I being too hard on myself? You know what I'm saying? Am I not giving myself enough mental room to kind of handle all the things and stuff? So it's interesting. And, we signed her back up for in-person classes in January, but I doubt they're going to go back. I think that they probably won't go back. I'm guessing it won't be till fall of next year by the time they actually have. Because, the thing is that like by the time everybody's vaccinated, it's going to be April.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what the hell's the point of sending the kids back in April? You might as well just finish the year out, the way you've been doing it.
Yeah.
So, I'm like, should I be writing a horror movie that's set as like a virtual learning situation? Like, should I be doing that?
Yeah.
And other people I know have like, they've got it just as bad. And there's some people who like, thankfully I work from home and like, so we had the ability to do this, but then there's some other people when the school district goes 100% virtual, what do the parents do that don't work from home?
Yeah.
Do one of them have to quit their job? Do they have to hire a nanny? What do they do? Like, how do they get their kid to do their schoolwork?
My boss at the retail place I'm working at he convinced his wife to quit her job because she also worked retail and he had the better paying job. And he was like, we can't both be at work and school our kid.
No, it's impossible. And when you're schooling your kid, it's like, depending on the age, it's also a full-time job. It really is. Like if you have a kindergartner, you're in trouble. And I know I have a friend they have a kindergartner. Luckily both parents work from home, but one of them is still going to quit their job, even though they're both working from home because they can't get the kid to focus. He hates the Zoom calls. They're, piling all of his homework on it. And both parents can't get the, like, they both work for farmers. And so they're the insurance company. So it's like one of them is going to quit their job and then focus solely on schoolwork until this is all over. And then,
and then you'll see what the world's like. Yeah.
And I feel bad because I've been terrible at getting back to people. Sometimes people are like, and they're always people without kids. They're always messaging me, "Hey, what do you do?" I'm like, they're like, "We can't get a hold of you." I'm like, "That's because I'm submerged in." It's like I'm, it's 2 full-time jobs that I'm basically juggling on top of everything, and then we're doing some renovations to our house on top of it, which was, that's one thing that I can say has been okay about being stuck at home is we're like, we meant to fix that like 2 years ago. Let's do it now. Let's get it done. So,
the living room is the best I've ever had it. Like, it's got the best setup it's ever been in. We've got a new piece of
Right.
furniture. It looks the best it's ever looked. You're right.
Right. Exactly. It's like, yeah, now you have time because you're stuck at home. But I don't know, man. We'll see what happens. And hopefully when the vaccine and when Biden takes over, everything will slowly be getting better, maybe, I guess. I don't know.
That that was like my small bit of hope that I've like held on to, is like, well, maybe that'll change enough that something will change and the world will be different.
Yeah.
Because it
I don't
needs
know,
to be
man.
different.
Well, so far, we'll see. Once Trump is escorted out, maybe. I don't know. Like, I'm waiting for him to. He keeps doing crazy shit, and that's the thing. It's just like, how crazy. I just. It's baffling to me, and of course I expected it. Like, I was like, how is he's not gonna like just say, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna leave." So yeah, it's been an interesting year. It's been one for the record books. And the thing is that, like, I keep telling people, I hate to tell you this, but like, just because it becomes 2021,
it's not different.
It's not different. The virus doesn't care if the calendar changes. So I'm always like, just it's a mindset. People are gonna have some positive energy. Everybody has positive energy going into the new year, no matter how crappy the year turns out. So,
it's been a funny thing that, like, I feel like the past 4 or 5 years, really, like, probably 2016 was the first one where people were like, oh man, 2016 was so rough. Like, luckily it's 2017. And then every year at the end of the year, we get these memes that are like, this year was so rough.
Oh, I know. And then I laugh about it because on Facebook, everybody goes, oh man, I can't wait to get out of this dumpster fire of a year. And I'm kind of like, look, here's the deal. Your mentality is going to follow you into the next year. So if you're like kind of always glass is half empty, it's not going to change.
Yeah.
Going into the next year. And so I think, and I'm generally a fairly glass is half full kind of guy. I just have to be, because I'm in the film business. And if you're not, if you're not going to be looking at the positive side of things all the time, then you're going to be woefully disappointed in everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to go, like, I'll easily, like, full on neurotic, like, worry spiral, but like, generally I'm pretty positive.
Yeah.
Like, I've got both, like,
yeah. I mean, I think everybody does to some extent,
Yeah. I'll let myself full worry spiral, but I also, like, I was talking to a KU film professor a couple of years ago about the fact that, like, every film you make, you have to fully believe it's going to Sundance.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you don't believe that, like, you might as well not put all that effort in. You know what I mean? You got to just be like, well, this is going to be successful. It's going to go to Sundance. Everyone's going to watch it. It's going to be the new big thing. Like,
yeah, right.
Even if it makes no sense, it's full dream believing, but like, I'll fully go into that fantasy too. So like,
yeah, I mean, and I remember because Kevin Wilmot was my professor at KU when I was there, and he gave me some pieces of advice when I graduated. He's like, you got to keep a good sense of humor in being in the film biz, because otherwise you're going to be like crying yourself to sleep at night. And then he goes, don't work for Troma, which cracked me up because I was like, well, I like Troma, but he's like, they don't pay. I was like, okay. No, he gave me a lot of words of wisdom when I graduated, because and most of it has been true,
I was going to ask, so I know so little about you. So did you went to KU then?
Yeah.
That's where you came from?
Yeah.
Okay, see, so I'm a little bit younger than you, and by the time I came into like the KC film scene, you were already like who you are, like everyone was already like, I'm going to ask, I feel dumb asking this now. Is it Ray, or is it Patrick Rea?
Yes.
Okay, good. I was going to say it wrong.
A lot of people get that wrong because they're always like, Rea. I'm like, no, it's just Ray. It's 3 letters. It's Ray. And now a lot of people spell it R-A-E for some reason. And I'm like, no, it's R-E-A. But people have been mispronouncing it since I was in grade school. So don't worry about it. I
had to ask though, because like I'm going to record an intro later where I'm going to have to say your name. I'm so glad I now know. That was the most important question in this whole interview.
Right. I mean, it's funny because I have a lot of people ask me that, and it's for me, it's like, I think I'm okay with people mispronouncing it. It's when they spell it wrong that it drives me crazy, because then it's like, I'm just like, it's only 3 letters. It's only 3 letters. It's not that hard, but
it gives me anxiety every time I type it, if that makes you feel better.
Really?
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. Cause it's the 3 letters and like I'm a little bit dyslexic. So like there's always that moment where I'm like, A and E look so similar. Like,
yeah. Sometimes I see it where they add like an H to it, and I'm like, where the hell did that come from?
when you start adding letters, it's pretty obvious that you're insane.
Exactly.
Yeah. But so you went to KU Film School?
Yeah.
Were you always like, was that always the goal, was film?
Yes. I grew up in Nebraska, so I grew up in like a small town in Nebraska, and
how'd you end up here?
What's that?
How'd you end up here?
At the time, because this was the late 90s. Okay, so I graduated high school in 98, and I transferred to first I went to a community college for 2 years just to get my gen eds out of the way. So in 2000, I transferred to KU from Nebraska. At the time, there wasn't anything substantial in Lincoln or Omaha in terms of film school at the time.
Okay.
So KU was my best option at that point. And it was like,
because it's kind of close to home, but
it was one of the best decisions I ever made, because I got to work on CSA, which was Kevin Wilmot's first movie at Sundance. And so like and I was in school at the same time as Jeremy Osborne. We were all in classes together. I don't know if you know. Do you know Jeremy?
I know Jeremy. Yeah, my wife's worked with him.
And then there's like a bunch of people that were all kind of like in the same classes together and stuff. And it was great. It was a good time to be there. And I graduated in December of 2002, and then decided to stay in Lawrence. I took a part-time job at the TV station there, and just started making my own films and just keep working and making little movies and such. And we were shooting on mini DV tape a lot of the times, because I'd shoot on 16 millimeter if I could afford it, but 90% of the time I couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
So I met my wife at the TV studio in Lawrence, Channel 6, and we were both working in production, and so that's how we met. And she quit before I left, though. She quit in I think she quit in 2008. She became she started working at the Arts Incubator in the Crossroads. It's now a different place, but it was the art gallery that was down there.
So what TV station did you work at?
Channel 6 in Lawrence. It was called Free State Studios.
Okay.
They changed their name like 3 times.
Was that news, or was that like some sort of like public broadcast type?
It was news, but they were also producing like music shows and a whole bunch of other things. So it was like I would be like, I'd do a newscast, and then at night I'd go to the Granada and film for the music show called what was it called? The Turnpike.
Okay.
And you know Tony Ontiveros, right?
I don't. So we're Facebook friends. I don't think I've ever actually met him, though.
So he was a few years behind me at KU. He might have graduated in 2005, 2006, but he started working at Channel 6, and he was working in a different department than me. But he ended up leaving. I left in 2010. I think he left in 2013, 14.
Okay.
But like a lot of people, it's so funny because a lot of people I work with on film shoots, I met it either through Channel 6 or through KU.
Well, that was going to be one of the questions. Is like, I watched everything you sent me. The only thing I didn't watch was Nailbiter. I was going to, and then I just didn't get around. I just didn't have the time today. And
it's the only one you have to pay for too.
True.
It was, for some reason they have not put that free on like Amazon or Vudu. You still have to rent it, which I don't know what that means. I don't know. But
my plan today, I was going to rent it. I was like, all right, so I'm going to rent it at like 4, because that's when I have time, and then I'll watch it till like 5:30, and then I'll talk to you. It'll be perfect. It'll be just fresh. And then my day just kept getting pushed back by that half hour, and by the time it was like it's 4:45, and I was like, I can watch half of it. I
can still talk about it. We shot that movie was made prior to all the rest of the features, so it's
Well, so watching everything, I noticed in a lot of the first stuff, and even Nailbiter, it's all DP'd by the same person.
Yeah, Hanuman Brown Eagle.
Yeah. So did you meet him
Yes.
at film school or did you meet him at the news station?
So I met him through somebody at Channel 6, but he was working at Platform. I don't know if you've ever heard of that company.
I
I don't
haven't.
even know if it's still I don't even know if it's still around. Platform was a ad agency here in town. Kind of like Take Two was, and I'm not even sure it's still around, but a lot of people came out of that place too. So it was like you were either working at Channel 6 or Platform for a while, and then Outpost had been around, and a lot of people were working through them, and this was like the early 2000s, the mid 2000s at that point. I think the first thing I ever shot with Hanu was a short film in like 2006, and I didn't send you everything.
Yeah, I looked at your IMDb and I was like, oh, there's a lot of earlier stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of early shorts, and they're all like on my Vimeo, or they're it's just it's crazy trying to keep track of everything, to be honest with you. And some stuff, it's so funny because I was just like, man, the raw footage is on mini DV tape. How the hell would I even get to it now? And that's the thing, is that like, a lot of these movies were shot, like I said, like maybe 2007, 2008, but they were shot in like on a Panasonic HVX on like those,
Yeah.
cards, and all the footage you have to have either a PC or Avid to open the footage. So it's like I still have all the footage saved on hard drives, but if I was ever to want to go back, and I don't plan on ever doing that, but if I ever wanted to do that, I would be like, all right, I gotta buy Avid, or I have to find somebody with Avid, because I don't know anybody who uses Avid anymore. At least, locally, especially.
Yeah.
Everybody I know either uses Final Cut or Premiere at this point.
Yeah, those are pretty much it that I. Yeah.
So,
I guess I should go all the way back. So before you came to Kansas, you already wanted to be a filmmaker. What started that? I'm always intrigued about like what was the thing that you were like, I'm going to do this.
Growing up in a small town in Nebraska, there wasn't a heck of a lot to do. So I would go to the movies, or go to the local video stores. At the time we had 3 or 4 different video stores in my hometown. So
isn't that crazy? Don't you miss that?
Yeah, I do. I
really
had
do.
I had to explain it to my daughter like 2 nights ago. I said, there are these places. Family Video is still around, but it's not quite the same.
I'm working at Vintage Stock right now, and I literally watched a dad explain to their probably 6-year-old kid like what a CD was.
Yeah, which Vintage Stock do you work at?
Shawnee.
Okay, because there's 2 by me, and I go to them like once a week. I'm at Vintage Stock. But there's one in Gladstone, and then there's one in Zona Rosa.
Yeah,
yeah, and that's the one I go to the most.
The Zona Rosa one's the nicer one. That's a nice one.
And it has, my daughter is collecting ties, which are those stuffed tie animals, and so they have like a plethora of them that she's just like, oh, I want that one and I want that one. So I guess it would go all the way back to being in grade school, really, and I just wanted to make movies, and I would tell everybody that that's what I was going to do. And in the late 80s, early 90s, everybody kind of was like, sure, that's cute. And at the time, I get it,
there wasn't there wasn't a way to do it.
There was no way to do it, and so it was one of those things where my parents thankfully never deterred me from it. So they were always kind of like, okay, you do you, we'll help you out. I'm like, cool. And I was like, all right, well, and they got me a video camera.
So was that like a cassette camera or like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the big surprise was that I somehow could get Super VHS to record with it. And at the time, I thought I was super cool because I could buy S Video, which was slightly better than VHS, and shoot on that. And this was still pre-mini DV and all that stuff. So this was probably mid to late 90s at that point. And where it really, I really caught the bug was high school. My high school had its own channel, which at the time was very interesting. Like, who has their own? So basically, if you had cable in my hometown, you could turn to channel 99, and it was like a high school broadcast channel.
That's cool.
Primarily was used for basketball and football games.
Yeah.
So this is probably 1997 ish. So that I was in like a tech class or video. It became video production at that point for me. And so like I had my own green screen, and I started making movies in my high school. And then I'm not leaving the school. Like the janitor would have to kick me out because he'd be like, you need to go home because I need to finish cleaning up. So I was like making little spaceships on fishing line, and I would shoot them on these green screens and try to do some cool Star Wars effects and stuff. And it was basically two, big super VHS decks and a Videonic switcher, so that I would just be like, oh, I've got my green screen on one side and my output on the other, and I would just be doing little effects between the two and adding titles and stuff. And nothing was done with computers at that point. So I did that, and then I, graduated, went to a small community college for a couple of years, and continued doing video production. And I was filming mostly like any of the musicals or the shows. I was acting in some of the musicals, and I wasn't acting in the musicals. They were like murder mystery comedies. So I continued working there on that stuff. And then when I transferred to KU, all of a sudden they were like, oh, you should be editing in Premiere. I'm like, what's Premiere? So this was like maybe 2000, 2001 at that point. And I started editing on Premiere and shooting on mini DV. But then if I had the money, because at that point, some of my classes, film production classes, you still had to shoot on 16 millimeter film.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm honestly a little jealous of you in the fact that like I am young enough that like when I was probably 13, my parents got me a digital camera, so it was all SD cards, and then like when I was in high school, it was all to mini DV to the computer.
Right.
So like I don't have that like physical relationship and editing knowledge that like you have with film or even with VHS, like reel to reel VHS. Like
I did everything on VHS up until my junior year of college, because that's when I transferred to KU, and then they started you out on 16 millimeter in basic film and intermediate film, which you shot black and white film in basic film, and then you moved to color film. And it was pricey, it was expensive.
Oh, I'm sure.
And then so basically at that point, mini DV started to kind of become a thing. And I think it was the Canon XL1. One of the video classes got the Canon XL1, which was like the camera at the time. And it was pretty impressive at the time. I think Soderbergh used it on one of his movies at that point. I can't remember which one. Might have been Full Frontal. That might have been the movie that he used it on. And so all of us were either had the GL1 or the XL1, which was, at that point, state of the art. And then it just kept getting better and better. But if I had the extra money, I would shoot on 16 millimeter. I shot, I think the last short film I made on 16 was in 2006. And Jeremy Osborne was actually the DP. And it just got so expensive. And you had to figure out a way so you had to get it transferred, and they'd send back a tape, and then you're like, okay, now how do I get this? So then you have to transfer that to a mini DV tape, so then you could capture that into the computer. And it's like, I still have the negative and everything, and I kept all that stuff, but it's like at some point you're just like, okay, well, how many generations does it take to get this into my computer so I could edit it?
Yeah.
So it wasn't the best way of doing things. And so we ended up just continuing to shoot on mini DV, and then obviously moved to the memory cards that were in the Panasonic HVX, I think around 2008, 2007, maybe. Yeah. So at that point I was making short films and still working at the TV studio in Lawrence. And then basically playing at film festivals. And I started actually going to these film festivals and trying to kind of build some awareness of what I was doing, I guess.
When do you start getting into festivals? Like, I know that Woman's Intuition was kind of, it's the first thing that's like really in your bio as like a moment, and like, it got some note. Is that like really the first notice that you kind of got?
Yeah, I mean, we ended up winning a Heartland Emmy with that, which was kind of cool. We shot that movie, believe it or not, on a Vericam, which were bigger tapes. And I think we ended up, yeah, that was like the only movie I shot with a Vericam. Yeah, I would say that was the first time I ever worked with Hanem and Brown Eagle, and that was the first time that was the first time I paid a crew, which was like this big thing for me, because I was like, oh my God, I finally can pay people. So yeah, that was definitely a turning point. And so what ended up happening is I started doing some short film work while I was working at the TV studio, and they started kind of putting in like a little annual budget for me.
Oh, wow.
To make some short films. So, and I would put their logo at the beginning whenever they would play. And so when we won the Heartland Emmy for Women's Intuition, it was the first time that the TV studio had won a Heartland Emmy.
Okay.
So it was kind of like this mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah, so is that where you got the ability to pay a crew was from the TV station?
Right. So I was able, I would put together budgets, and then I would say, okay, at the end of, when they were pitching their New Year budget, I would come in with that and say, I want to make over the course of the year 4 short films with XYZ, and then they would approve or not approve. And so for them, it was like kind of like cool advertising. They were trying to like branch out and do some different things.
Yeah.
And so having their logo at the beginning at a film festival was kind of cool for them. And so that's kind of what, and that took me into making Nailbiter, and which I was able to pull together the financing for through various sources. And we shot that movie. Man, that movie took forever. We started shooting it in like 2009. And I don't think we had a screenable movie until 2011.
Oh, wow. That's how I feel with the feature I'm working on right now, is I think we started it 3 years ago at this point.
Well, and you're probably you're doing good. You're doing good. Like that, you may not feel that way, but for your it takes some time. And the thing is that, like, I think by the time we ended up finishing the movie in 2011, not doing film festivals until 2012, and then it got picked up, and then the distributor didn't release it in Redbox till just like May of 2013. So by the time we got done with the process, it was like 4 years, and I was like,
and you're on something else completely at that point.
Right, you're so tired of it that you're like, okay, cool, it's out, it's done, I can move on and do something else. And I think Enclosure was the next movie, which ended up being retitled as Arbor Demon, despite my protests. And that was the next movie I ended up making, and I co-wrote that with Michelle Davidson, who I don't know if do you remember watching KC Live when it was on the air? Did you ever catch it?
I know of KC Live. I don't think I ever actually watched it.
She was the host, co-host for it.
Yeah.
For many years. And she is a fantastic screenwriter, and we co-wrote Enclosure and had full intention to shoot it around the Ozark area. So we wrote it for the Ozarks. We were going to shoot it in that area. And then the financing ended up coming through in South Carolina. And so we ended up shooting the whole movie in Charleston.
Yeah. How did the two of you get together to write it? Because is that the first thing you wrote together?
Yeah, I mean, more or less. I mean, we had worked on a couple of short films together, and so she and I decided to write this feature together, and I mean, we luckily were able to get financing for it, and we shot it. It was so strange. We shot it in like around Christmas time. I can't think, it was 2015 maybe, and it was so weird because I flew into Charleston before Thanksgiving and I was prepping the movie, and then I left for Thanksgiving and then came back, and we shot it in like a 12-day span. It was 6 days. Yeah. 6 days on, 1 day, or 1 day off, and then another 6 days on. So it was very fast.
That's an incredibly fast shoot.
And we cast Fiona Dourif maybe a week before production, and then like we got Jake Busey like maybe 2 days before we started shooting.
Wow.
It came together very fast.
So
And
I had a question about Jake. I have a couple questions about Jake Busey. One is that like, did you know you were going to put a like name in that role, or was that just like, did you luck into getting a name to attach to it?
the producers wanted a name, and they had thrown around they had approached quite a few different people. And it came down to, if I remember, it came down to Anthony Michael Hall or Jake Busey.
Okay.
And we all decided to go with Jake Busey. So, and he was great to work with. I mean,
yeah, that was my next question. What was it like working with Jake Busey and like having a name in your
chill.
film?
Like, he was super chill. And the thing is, like, well, I mean, he was laying around in the tent for most of the thing that was difficult was like if he had to pee. And we're inside, we're inside of this tent. And you got to remember that you got your two other actors in the tent. You got Jake, who's like 6 feet tall, with his leg is in a brace because he's been injured. And you got the camera, you've got the audio guy. So we had to basically buy various sizes of the tent because we had to make it look claustrophobic in some angles.
Yeah.
But then we had to fit the extra crew members in the tent too. So we were like, okay, we have to buy one that's a little bit bigger than what we need just to fit the crew in there. And all those tents were shot on a soundstage. So
really,
the exterior of the tent and all the stuff obviously was shot in the woods in the wilderness outside of Charleston. But then the actual tent interior stuff was all shot on a soundstage.
I love knowing that.
And they built like a forest around.
That's
my
so
art director,
cool.
She was fantastic. And she worked really hard to make it look realistic, because I said when we shoot out of the tent from the inside, it's got to still look like the woods.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, but we were able to control we were able to control the lighting, easier that way and such. So that was, as long as you go ahead.
That was my filmmaker nerd question, is the like night exteriors. Are those day for night or are those night shoots? Or do you remember?
The interior was day for night. So if you're inside the tent at night, that was still during the day, but we were on a soundstage. So
that makes sense.
It looked like moonlight. But obviously everything outside of the tent, for the most part, was actually at night.
That's actual at night. Just,
yeah.
It's so gorgeously lit. Like, that film is gorgeous to look at.
Yeah. And I mean, kudos to the crew, because it was like I came in with storyboards and shot lists and everything like that, and I was just like very overly prepared because
you had 12 days.
12 days, and I was like, oh my god! So and it was funny because they kept going lower and lower. It started out as like the producers are like, we're gonna do it in 18 days. I'm like, great, perfect. Then they're like, hey, can you do it in 15? And I'm like, sure. And then we got like right up to the wire, and they're like, we got to do this in 12 days. And I was just like, oh my God. So yeah, there was about 2 weeks there where I was pretty stressed out, and there's no way around it. You just have to kind of jump in and
you just got to get it done. That's the job. Yeah.
And there's not a lot of time for a lot of takes. So I have to get in there and I have to just, shoot as much as I can and get in the can and make the day. That very last scene with all the creatures in the woods, all of that stuff, everything from them running to the four-wheeler, the entire finale was all shot in one day. And it was the most, to the point where we ran out of sun because we're shooting in December. So,
oh my God. Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that. There's no sunlight.
There's no sunlight after about 4 o'clock. There's no usable sunlight. So we had to use condor lights, big condor lights, to basically make it look like it was still daylight out in the forest. So we were shooting night for day.
So you're shooting day for, yeah.
Yeah, right. So, so that was, and we had makeup effects on all the, it was just mind-boggling how that day, but luckily that day was leading to the day off. So everybody got their day off after that. So everybody could go home and just sleep the entire day and then come back refreshed the next day. So,
God.
Those are the kind of things that you just have to, deal with. And I forged a lot of good relationships on that movie, and And I ended up working on that CBS TV show, The
Yeah, I was
Inspectors.
going to ask about that, how that happened.
Yeah, and I ended up working on that, and that was shot in Charleston as well. So when I directed a couple of episodes, I was working with a lot of the same crew members.
Oh, okay. So
And
like,
so,
did you
go ahead.
meet the people to like forge those connections while filming Arbor Demon?
Yeah, one of the producers went on to become this show, basically one of the show producers
Got
for
it.
the Inspectors, and so he contacted Michelle and I, and we started writing episodes. So we ended up writing, man, we wrote 8 episodes maybe of that show, and then I directed 2 episodes. And that show, working on Enclosure, Arbor Demon was like prep for shooting television, because shooting television, it's like we were doing 10 pages a day, and it was just like, yeah, it was insane. So you had to come in, and luckily these actors had been doing the show for, this was the 3rd season, so
Yeah.
they knew their characters, so there wasn't anything I had to do in terms of like, hey, this is your motivation. What I did have to do though is I had to be very involved with casting the day players, because they were like
Yeah.
the people who were in one episode versus every episode. And because I knew that if I didn't cast those actors correctly, that I was going to be screwed, because I was like, all right, I'm only going to have time for 3 takes.
Yeah, they've got to get it right. They have to show up, do their job correctly.
You got to get people in there going to nail it so that you can keep moving. And so, so that in that regard, it was tricky. I had a great crew. A lot of the crew members had also worked on Enclosure. So there was some shorthand with some of those crew members, but for the most part I was meeting a whole new group of people.
Yeah, so that was something that I was very intrigued about, because that's an experience I don't have at all, of like staff writing for a show that like isn't your conception. Like,
Yeah,
they brought you on, you just wrote a couple, you and Michelle wrote some episodes, you've directed a couple episodes. Like,
yeah.
how strange, difficult was that to just put yourself into this other thing?
That show was maybe a little different from other shows in the sense that they basically they had, each episode was based on a real scenario. I mean, I don't know if you've watched the show, but it's like I always say it's CSI for kids.
Okay.
It's like each story involves some crime that involves the post office, and so the postal inspectors are coming in to solve the mystery. And then you've got the subplot involving the kids, and so there's it's very much a kid's show. They would basically give us an outline for our episode, which it was more like a beat sheet. So they would create a beat sheet, send us the beat sheet, and they had said that everything involving the crime had to stick to the facts of what actually happened. So they had a guy who was like a postal inspector consultant, and he would tell us, okay, yeah, this is how it happened, so we have to keep it fairly like factual in that regard. So and some of the plots were just goofy, but they were like, yep, this really happened. I'm like, all right, cool. But then like we were given a little bit more flexibility with the interpersonal relationship stuff. Obviously they had to make sure that it followed the arc of the story that they were going for that season. But we would turn in a draft. Michelle and I would go back and forth, turn in a draft, and they would send us back notes, or they would say, this is great. And we were like, really? Okay. So, and then one of the episodes I directed, Michelle and I wrote. So it was interesting because, I got to really take it from writing it to getting it, shot. And then the other episode was written by, I think, the lead actress who played the mom on the show, and a couple other the writers. They had like 3 or 4 writers per episode, believe it or not. So everybody kind of, you just had to be, even though Michelle and I wrote the episode, we understood that stuff was going to get changed, that was the way it was. And even on the set, on set, it was changing. But the crazy thing was that, again, we were shooting 10 pages a day, and it was 105 degrees with the humidity and stuff like that. And so we were shooting outside, and the actors had to wait till we were absolutely ready, because otherwise they were just sweating. and their hair would get all messed up and stuff. So it was interesting in that regard. But yeah, it was definitely it's so far been my only experience doing episodic television at this point.
Yeah. So let's. I mean, it's cool that you've done that. That's an incredible thing to have on your resume.
That. It ended up the show ended up getting an Emmy nomination this last season for best. What was it best something? It was a best kid show or something like that. So it was great. It was good. It was a good experience, and then I came back and I did the family film.
Yeah.
Which was again, I had this weird like detour from horror to family, and I don't know if that was why that is, but it just kind of worked out that way.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that because like your career very much is like even starting with like Woman's Intuition, like there's a horror lean to all of it,
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden out of nowhere there's Belong to Us and The Inspectors, and I'm like, where did that come from? Like, is that
originally I didn't want to do Belong to Us because I got approached by the writer producer was originally also going to direct, and then she had some health issues that come up, so she approached me about directing it, and I mulled it over for about a week, and then I finally decided to do it. So I had to find that angle about that movie that basically would interest me, because I was like, okay, I'm like, what is it about this that I can kind of sink my teeth into? For me, it was the father-daughter relationship, and I thought, well, I can relate to that in some capacity. So I decided to go from that approach, and I kept telling Hanu that I wanted to shoot it like it was more what's the word I'm looking for? Not Hallmarky. I didn't want it to look Hallmarky. I wanted it to look more indie. And that's probably why it ended up getting a PG-13 from the Motion Picture Association of America.
Yeah.
Which didn't surprise me because it has a dogfighting subplot, but I was a little surprised when they called and left me a voicemail, which is weird. It's always weird when the MPAA calls and leaves you a voicemail. Like, why do they call it? And then you're like, oh, I got a PG-13. It's kind of a surreal thing. And I think at the time I was actually at like a parent-teacher conference with my daughter. So I was like, this is a weird... Anyway, so I did that movie, and it found its way on the Up Network streaming service, and it seems to be doing all right. So, I was happy with it. And so you just kind of, I always say each movie, you try to get to the next one and the next one. And I Am Lisa came about sort of because of Belong to Us, which was strange.
Well, yeah, because Owen is in Belong to Us, and then his dad wrote I Am Lisa.
Yes. So, and he kept, when we were shooting Belong to Us, Eric was on set, and he was like, hey, I got this movie I wrote. We're writing a movie, we're doing a family film. So when he says, I'm writing a horror movie, I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah.
I got excited about it. And I mean, that was 2016, 17, around that time.
Yeah.
And, flash back to 2018, and he is still talking to me about it. And so I started kind of getting more hands-on with it. And then, we started doing some table reads in late 2018, early 2019. And, I started kind of, working with him with the script, and I started giving some suggestions to it. Originally, he had written the movie to be a little bit more, it had more male villains. So he and I kind of decided to kind of go more of the female slant with it, and make it more, the villains more, all female villains. Obviously, Chris Billsma still plays a jerk in that movie. But I wanted all the villains to be female, like the sheriff and all that, because I thought that would be way more interesting, and it would help the movie stick out more from a lot of the other revenge movies you see where there's a woman and she gets attacked by a bunch of dudes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I felt like that was, and so we gradually, it was funny because as we were doing the table reads, we were gradually flip-flopping, gender swapping all the bad guys. I'd be like, hey, can we get Sarah McGuire to come in? Hey, can we get, Manon Halliburton to come in? And let's just, don't change the dialogue yet. Just let them read it.
Yeah.
as themselves and stuff, and it seemed to be working. Um, so then flash forward, he ended up finding some money to make the film. Obviously, we had, again, a shoestring, and it was probably my lowest budgeted feature that I've ever worked on. And we shot it in 14 days, which was like a massage compared to the 12 days.
But like Enclosure has one location, really. It's the tent.
That's the difference. And that was the thing that, so I don't know if I'm a glutton for punishment or whatever, but I was like, oh, okay, we've got this movie and it has like 13 locations and maybe more. I don't know.
It's got so many locations.
It's so many locations, and we did it in 14 days. And I was like, so the key to making it work, and I got to give Tony Ontiveros props too, because he was doing the production management and creating the schedule with me. He and I would go back and forth with the schedule and try to figure out, okay, it was a Rubik's Cube. And I'm like, all right, we shoot here, this group of scenes here, and then we find a location that's like walking distance from this location. We can get all that done in one day. So like the bookstore that she works at in the movie was maybe a block from the Screenland Armor.
Oh, wow.
And then another block from that high-rise apartment building that's down there that it's about a couple minutes from Screenland. It's this big high-rise apartment. And that's where we made her apartment. So we were like, okay, well, we've got 3 locations right here that literally we could just hop, skip, and a jump away, you know? And that made things, you know, easier in that regard. So we were very strategic in that regard. So we were like, always like, okay, so, you know, and then there was a gas station location that was like a minute from my house, which is where, or it was the body shop. And then we were also trying to figure out how we were going to get all the makeup effects done. So most of the makeup effects in I Am Lisa were like one takers because we just didn't have any time to do any second takes.
You had to clean it up and do it again.
Well, and then the park that the deputy is killed in is also right by the Screenland Armor. So it was like this, basically, it's like, let's just turn that entire area into like a studio backlot.
Let's make the Northland our studio. Like, that's
right,
what we've got.
Exactly.
Like...
So, and then we did a lot of locations in like Kearney and Smithville. But yeah, we were able to get it all in 14 days. We had obviously some pickups later down the road, but that's, you know, nothing that big. And, you know, so that, you know, we shot that movie in July of 2019 and we premiered it this July of this summer. So it was a 1-year turnaround, which is the fastest turnaround. The only reason I think it was that fast is because we were on lockdown. And so I was like, all right, we got to get this movie done.
Yeah.
You know, we have nothing else to work on right now. So, I was able to get.
So how did you put it out? Did it do festival at all, or did you?
It premiered at Fright Fest in the UK.
Okay.
And so Fright Fest was the world premiere, and it was in August. And I think the Stylist screened there in their October version too. So it was funny because it was like 2 features from Kansas City, both screened at Fright Fest. And after that, we got picked up by a distributor. They put it out in some virtual cinemas in October, just as kind of more of like a way to, it was more publicity than anything.
Yeah.
And then January is the official release date. I don't know the actual, we're coming out in the red box in January. I just don't know when in January at this point. So that's the plan. So it'll be red box, and then it'll probably be also streaming at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'll be doing like Amazon and iTunes and Vudu and all that stuff.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so this whole time though, like as we've been talking throughout, you've done these 4 features, but you've also shot so many short films.
Right.
And beyond just shot a bunch of short films, they're all very high quality with like incredible casts and crews. And so I'm assuming these have a budget to them, these short films that you're making.
Yeah. Usually, though Fused was pretty much, we just put that together. Everybody kind of volunteered their time because I know I wanted to work with Nick James and he wanted to work with me. So we were like, let's create a project. Sarah McGuire, that was the first time I'd worked with Sarah McGuire at that point. So that one was kind of like we just kind of made it happen. Spiritual Practice, which is the one that just screened at the New York City Horror Film Festival this last weekend. That one I had a budget for. And I keep the budgets relatively tight. And they're always done differently. Like everybody kind of asks me, they go, how do you find an investor? And I'm like, it's different every time. It really is. Like, it just depends on, you just have to talk to people and feel, don't be shy, I guess is what I don't know how else to, reach out to people and say, look, this is what I'm creating. But you got to make, unfortunately, at least in my journey, I had to make a lot of projects out of my own pocket or for free or pull it together so that when you do go to an investor, you're not coming in saying, I've never made a movie before, give me money. And that's a lot harder. So it's much easier once you've got some body of work to show, to go to an investor and say, look, here's the deal. And you have to be honest. I always tell investors with a short film, especially, this is more of a calling card or getting your, this is something that's going to play at festivals and maybe stream on some, I think a couple of my short films are going to be showing up on Bloody Disgusting TV. I don't know if you've heard of, do you know the website Bloody Disgusting?
I'm not at all a horror guy.
Okay.
I've inundated my brain with horror for the past 3 days just to talk to you.
I'm cool. Awesome. So yeah, so you have to be honest with people when it comes to making a short film. Obviously, when it comes to a feature, it's a lot different. So I am shooting one next weekend, as in like 4 days from now. And it's more of a sci-fi piece than it is horror. It has horror elements, but it's leaning a little bit more towards sci-fi. And small cast, only 2 actors, and shooting, trying to get it all shot in 2.5 days, hopefully. So, and it's, obviously we're all obeying the COVID precautions, and everybody's getting tested this week so that they know if they have it or not before we shoot. So yeah, and then over the summer I produced that short film Crockpot for Ty Jones.
Okay.
And I don't know if I sent that one to you.
No, I haven't seen that.
I think you'll get a kick out of it. I'll send it to you.
Awesome. Yeah.
And so, this year's been interesting because I've had about a shoot a month at this point. But I mean, I had a music video in July. I had short film in June, and various shoots across the board. But it's been, for the most part, it's been very slow this year. But that's just, it is what it is. That's where we're at.
I was going to ask about that because, like, to me, during the shutdown, it feels like there's like, you're big enough, you don't have to work, or you're too small like me to where you can't work because there's just like no way you can do it like in a safe way, or you're the perfect middle like ground of success where it's just like I have to work to keep going, and luckily I have the ability to do it with enough money that I can do it safely.
Yes, and I think luckily the shoots I've had we've been able to be safe, take all the precautions needed, get the lunches right, because everything's got to be prepackaged and everything like that, and be smart about it. The shoot with Ty we did in June was I think the crew was under 10 people, and we were able to find locations that would play ball with us because they didn't have anybody. We found a house where nobody was really living.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things you have to think about. But the music video I did in July was entirely outdoors, so everybody could kind of social distance and keep themselves. And obviously the same thing where we made sure all the meals were separated and all that stuff. I had a shoot in September where we rented an Airbnb, and that was great. Obviously we were able to, get in and get out and clean the place and make it look safe for everybody afterwards. And again, that was a crew of like 5 people. So it's like, we were able to kind of, I think it's a good time it's a tricky time, but you have to find those projects that work for, if you've been doing like really small indie films, it's probably still okay. The trick is the unions right now, because, obviously if you go and screen with SAG actors, there are a lot of precautions that need to be made. I mean, and so it's like if you're working with non-union actors, you still got to be safe. You still got to take all the precautions, but you don't have to deal with the union on top of it.
Yeah,
So
I think so. So where I'm at, just because like me and my wife produce and direct and write all of our stuff,
right,
I just feel personally that like I don't have the ability to ask two actors that maybe on different levels of safety to act against each other and breathe on each other. And like, so everything I've done since shutdown has been me, my wife, her family, who we've seen the entire shutdown.
right,
And
right.
that's it. Like that's our, we're like, that's our cast. That's our crew, which is fine. Cause our crew is generally me, my wife, and her sister anyway.
Sure.
That is IX Productions. So like, but it's made it, you've got to think an extra level to be like, all right, how many stories can I tell with 2 to 3 people?
Right. And that's the thing, is that this one I'm shooting this weekend is 2 people and they're isolated. They're in separate rooms. So there are things that I'm doing. It's a pandemic style movie, but it's not the same thing. I know people they're like, don't make a movie about a virus. I'm like, oh, that means I'm going to make a movie about a virus. Damn it. So, right. You have to be, with the music video, it was one performer.
Yeah.
It wasn't a band. It was one performer. With Ty Jones's short Crockpot, it was 2 actors.
Yeah.
So those are the things you have to think of. And the funny thing is that those are the things I think about anyway. Like I'm always thinking, how do I make an interesting story with limited amount of actors and locations? So my brain is already wired that way. You know what I'm saying? So thankfully, and so in some ways, it's like I'm writing a haunted house movie right now, right? And it has like 2 actors and so it's like, those are the things that I've been kind of already thinking about before this all happened. But obviously things are a lot different in terms of keeping crew. You got to, keep the crew below 10. You got to, and I'm including the actors in that too.
Oh, wow.
I don't want to I'm talking 10 people on set. At a time. So, those are the things that right now that are tricky. It was funny because when we were doing Crockpot, it was June, so it was still really pretty early, and restaurants were closing at like 8:30, 9 o'clock, but we were doing overnight shoots. So as a producer, I'm thinking, okay, I got to get lunch for everybody. What's open?
Yeah.
So I was like, crap, it was a 3-day overnight production. So I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? So each night I'd be like, okay, I'm going to just go to Hy-Vee and I'm going to go to their deli section. And I'm going to like buy every pre-wrapped sandwich and just say, all right, guys, here's lunch, because at that time, nobody was delivering. Yeah. I mean, it was just very tricky. So, so those are the things that, you got to keep in mind. So I think my next project I've got 2 screenplays I've been working on. One originally was going to be something I was going to try to do really on the cheap. And then it's now kind of being developed by a different company, so it's becoming this other thing. So I was like, all right, well, this one might take a little bit more time now because there's more people involved and there's more like, hey, let's change this character and let's make these changes here. So I'm gonna let that kind of become its own thing and just have a bunch of rewrites I need to do on it. But then I'm writing a small haunted house movie, and I hope to shoot it. Maybe I shoot in February or March, depending on time and who's all vaccinated at that point. So
yeah,
but it's going to be one of those ones where I'm like, all right, we're going to keep the crew very small and just try to get it shot. And you can do a lot with sound effects and such. And I've always wanted to make a haunted house movie. So, and though it's a haunted house movie, but it's a lot different than what I'm maybe saying. It's not an average house movie. So.
I always hate like talking about projects before they're like really conceptualized or like created, because like, well, it's this, but it's also not, and I don't want you to decide it.
I know, and I'm always kind of like, well, now I've talked about it. Now it's almost like I've blackmailed myself into making it happen. I always tell people, I'm like, I'll keep talking about it because then I'm going to be too embarrassed not to make it now. I have to get this movie made.
I'll do the opposite thing way too much of where I just like won't talk about it. I will not talk about a project till it's finished because I'm like, I don't want someone to be like, oh, Patrick posted about that thing, and then he never put it out. Like,
yeah, I know.
He never made that thing.
Hey, I will talk about it with you, but I will not post anything about it on social media until it's done, probably.
Yeah.
Or at least in the can. So I probably, like I said, I'm not going to make it public knowledge on social media that I'm working on a ghost story, but
this is being recorded. You know that, right? No.
That's fine. It's something different about it, though. It's like, it's okay.
Yeah, no, I know.
But if I post anything on my Facebook wall, it feels different.
This is just like casual conversation that happens to be heard by whoever's your fan. But like, if you like post about it, it's like real. I understand.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden when people start liking it, and then like 3 years later, they're like, you didn't make that movie. Well, and the worst is that I've been trying to make a sequel to Nailbiter for years, and
it's on IMDb.
I know, and that it's written. It was very, very close. And then what happened was, like, I was going back and forth trying to get some money for it, and it just gets very difficult. And I Am Lisa fell in my lap, and I was like, I'm taking this.
I guess I'll just do this. Yeah.
I want to do this because I was compelled by it. I liked the actors that were involved. I thought it had a fun concept, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. And so then you realize when you take on a feature, and like, that's a year of your life right there, at least.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 or 3. And so all of your other projects kind of start.
They become less important for just a little bit.
And so, yeah, it's like that's like that movie for me. The second Nailbiter is almost like this thing that I'm like, I'm chasing after. And then I'm like, I need a break. I'm going to go work on this now, And so and the thing is that the problem being is that, it's been so long since we made the first movie. The concepts behind the first movie, I don't know if you know, it's a set up as a tornado storm movie, but then it becomes a monster movie, and the monsters.
I watched the trailer. If that's helpful.
The monsters in the movie. It's like, imagine if a werewolf, instead of a full moon, it was like a storm, and that's what turns people. So basically, these creatures in the movie are connected to bad weather.
Got it.
So that in itself, for me, I could make 10 movies about that concept, and I'd be like, I love it. Like, so there's that part of me that's kind of like, I just want to make another movie set in that, with that idea, maybe.
Yeah.
And so I've written the script, but it's like what's a good word? Instead of sequel, it's a tangequel. It's a tangent. It's like a tangent sequel where it's its own story. It's its own story, but it connects.
It's in the world of.
Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, that was my plan, because that way, if somebody can watch it and go, okay, I like that. I didn't know it was a sequel to another movie. I'll go back and watch that movie,
Yeah.
And there's also that little bit of like, I don't want to do it wrong, so I don't want to like, it was different with I Am Lisa, where I was like, okay, I have this very small budget, and it almost became like a dare. I was like, we're gonna work on this. We're gonna make this movie for a very small budget in a short amount of time with very talented actors and some makeup effects, and really try to make it into something special. But with Nailbiter, I'm kind of like, I'm scared to do a sequel unless I have like a larger budget. Like, I don't know what it is. I want to have a bigger budget for it.
I mean, so that's so funny that you feel that way, because I've got a movie that we made a couple of years ago, and like I'm now getting nervous to like say it out loud because I don't want people to know.
Right.
But so Zoink screened at KC Film Fest same year as Belong to Us.
Yeah.
I've written a sequel.
Yeah.
I've got a sequel written.
Is it Z2? Is it Z2?
I should call it that. I've been calling it Zoinked, like with
I like
ED.
That.
Thank you.
Or Zoinks. The mess. I don't know.
But like the way I've written the sequel is in a way that in my mind you could watch it and you don't need to have seen the first one.
Yeah, and that's the way. Unless you're making Mad Max or Mad Max 2, or Mad Max 2 is one of those movies where it's funny, because I think Mad Max is playing behind me. At least it was earlier. I saw The Road Warrior before I ever saw Mad Max.
Yeah.
Right? You can watch Road Warrior without ever really seeing Mad Max.
And that's because a lot of people didn't see Mad Max. And that's my plan with Zoink, is that like, not everyone saw Zoink. And I desperately want a bigger budget for Zoinked.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
I am not at the place to have that bigger budget yet, so I can't make it in my mind. Like I just
Well,
can't make it till I got
now
that
I'm in
budget.
I'm in the same boat with if I ever want to make an I Am Lisa 2, because all the actors want to like, they're like, hey, I know we're dead, but we want to come back. I'm like, okay, well, if we ever want to do that, then we're like, oh, we're in the same kind of situation where
You want to do it bigger.
Bigger, right? But there's a part of me now, I don't know if it's just, I'm always kind of like, it doesn't have to be bigger. It just has to be, it has to expand. It has to make new choices. It has to be, better in terms of story and all that.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of stop thinking like James Cameron and start thinking more like you're an indie filmmaker and you're trying to make a sequel, but yeah, I would definitely, I'd be interested in making an I Am Lisa 2. And there's been some back and forth with a script right now. And the lead actress, Kristen Vaganos, is the sweetest girl in the world. And I'd love to work with her again. She's just great. Maybe sometime I'll get a second nail biter off the ground and call it something completely different. Then people will watch and they go, wait a minute, is this a sequel?
Does this take place in the same world?
Yeah, right. At some point I'll make it happen, but
it's cool to know that like you have this like horror slant just naturally, because I was curious about like if it came out of knowing that horror has a bigger indie market, or like was that a choice you made, or is that just what you like?
Yeah, it's just what I like, and that's really what it is. I watch as many horror movies as I can get my hands on.
Okay.
And it's like I'm probably a pretty good person to have on your trivia team if the category is horror movies.
Got it. I would be dead. I watched Halloween for the first time ever this year.
No way. Really?
Yeah. And that's like the only horror movie I've seen now, pretty much.
Okay, so I was a kid in the 80s, right? And it was very strange because, I think back to my daughter's, and it's interesting now because my daughter's childhood, it's weird. They go to the Halloween store and they have all this merchandise for these characters that are basically were like the forbidden fruit of my childhood. Now you can buy Freddy Krueger socks, or what I'm saying? Like it's just a different
it's a different landscape.
Now. Well, because now they're almost like Frankenstein and Dracula were to me as a kid. You know what I'm saying? Where they're like,
I never thought about that, but you're so right.
They're watered down, and they're almost like they're just not.
They're everywhere.
Pennywise is now the most frightening thing for my daughter. Like the new Stephen King It movies, like those scare her. But like Freddy and Jason, and she's just kind of like whatever. But as a kid, it was one of those things where you go to the video store and like they had like the cardboard cutouts of Freddy Krueger, or it was strange because you would go to the store and they would have Freddy dolls on sale.
Yeah.
And you're like, they're marketing this character to kids, and I'm like 7 or 8 years old. And so I became very interested in that. And the fact that my mom and dad were like, don't watch those movies. And then immediately you're like, well, why? Why shouldn't I be watching them?
Well, now I really want to.
Exactly. So that was what got me into horror. And so I got like into Fangoria magazine, and I started buying issues of Fangoria magazine, and I would count down the days when I was in high school. I'd go to every horror movie. I went to the opening night of Scream when I was in high school. Like those are the things that I looked forward to.
I think my internet has dropped you. Oh, there you're back.
Oh yeah, you froze.
Yeah. That happened to me over here, and I was like, "Oh no!" I got real nervous. But
did you hear what did I cut out at all? Or
you cut out when talking about seeing all that stuff? Like we were talking about.
Oh, I was just saying my favorite series of movies is probably Star Wars, but it has nothing to do with. I'm ultimately a sci-fi guy too.
Okay.
But, I mean,
so I've seen Alien. Alien's a huge one for me.
Yeah.
I love that. I love Star Wars. I'm a huge sci-fi guy.
Yeah.
But I just never moved into horror. And I think the way you talk about horror of like it being the thing that like your parents were like, oh, that's not, don't look into there, was kind of how comedy was for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because my parents were like, they would watch comedy films and I would like sit in a different room and hear them laugh. And they're like, oh, it's not, you're too young for those words. And
Yeah.
so like, and then stand-up comedy, when I started listening to it, they were like, that's not appropriate. You need to turn that one off. And I was like, well, why is like, so that's how I got inundated into comedy, is the same way you did horror. It's just different
I have a
directions.
very vivid memory. I think I might have been 4 or 5 years old, and my parents rented The Keep, which is a very kind of an obscure horror movie. It's directed by Michael Mann, who he's a famous director, Michael Mann, and he did the movie Heat with Robert De
Oh
Niro
yeah, I
and
know he
Al
got it.
Pacino. But he did a horror movie in the early '80s called The Keep, which is like this very strange horror movie set inside of a castle, and it's got Nazis, and there's just this weird. Look it up sometime because it's very strange. But I remember I just laid by the door while they watched it and listened to it from under the crack in the door to see and I remember hearing the dialogue, and I'm like, I created this completely different movie in my head, because then I ended up eventually seeing it, like maybe when I was like 9 or 10. I finally saw the movie, and it has Ian McKellen, and it has like Gabriel Byrne, and it has all Scott Glenn. It's got this very interesting cast, but it's interesting. You build up something in your head when you hear the dialogue and you don't see it for a long time. It becomes almost like this mythic thing. And then when you finally see it, you're like, oh, that's what it was the whole time. Okay, whatever. I mean, and I think horror is some ways is like that, where your parents will be like, don't watch this. It's scary. And then you build it up in your mind as one thing. And it becomes almost like this, it's forbidden fruit in many ways. And then you finally watch it and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, the only movie that ever lived up to that was The Exorcist for me. That movie still scares me.
Okay. Is it the whole demon thing, or what?
I think it's just the movie, I think, is a masterpiece in tone. I think that movie manages to maintain a specific creepy tone throughout the whole movie. And
I need to watch it. I know.
Yeah, it's I think it lives up to its reputation.
Okay.
And I think some movies get scarier with age. I don't know if it's because of the way they look, the way the music is, or if the way it's shot. Sometimes the older the movie, the creepier it is, and especially horror movies from the 70s, I think, are some of the creepiest. Like The Omen is a terrifying movie, I think. I have a hard time getting scared by new movies.
Interesting.
I have to really, like, I don't know, like newer movies have to work really hard to scare me. And the things like, for me, I also like movies like I Am Lisa, where it's not, the scary part isn't the point. It's not supposed to be scary. It's a horror movie, but it's more like fun and like.
I mean, I definitely noticed you have like a comedic slant to your horror.
Right.
Is that like you like to? I was telling my wife about it because I've watched them all, and I was like, his work is almost the antithesis of what we do, because you like set up a comedic world and then something scary happens. Where I like to set up a world that feels like it's going to be a horror movie.
Well, it was like your pumpkin short.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I thought that was great. I actually commented on it on YouTube.
I know. It meant so much to me, actually, to see your comment. I was like, oh my God.
Oh, well, I was just like, I love that. It was funny. And those,
but that's what I love, to build it up with a tension and then just completely break it with farts. That's
right. And so it is kind of the inverse of like the short film Rattle I sent you, where it's like comedic world, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God.
That one, yeah. I showed that to my boss at work. I was like, you got to watch this for a minute. Just like, it's just, it shook me when it first popped up. I was like, oh my God. And I was like, oh, okay.
The thing was that guy, oh my God. So I wanted to make something with I wanted to make that originally with Violet. That's my second daughter. That's in the film. And I wanted to shoot that movie years and years ago when Violet was a baby. And I just, I got sleep deprived. I was working on other things. And so
you had a baby.
So when Willow was born, I was like, we're shooting this movie. I don't care. Shoot me. I'm like Chad Crenshaw. Basically, it's like that is my wife in the movie. And like Chad Crenshaw is me. I'm like, Chad, you're playing me, basically. And then I got, this guy named Bob Barber to play the monster, and
he's amazing.
Jackie Butler did the makeup, and it was just like, holy crap. And she did it so fast too. And the poor guy, like he was in that. And the thing is, like, I showed it to my mother, and she's like, I can't believe you made her cry with that monster. And I'm like, she was never in the same room with that monster. Like when we were filming her crying, it was my wife and I, like, and then when the monster came in, I was like, the camera's where the baby was. So they were never in the same room together. So,
I'm not a bad dad, I promise.
I was gonna say no psychological damage was done to my daughter. Oh, here she comes.
Hi.
She's much bigger now. She talks and she walks. Hi. I figured she'd make a cameo at some point tonight.
I love it.
It's funny because, like, whenever I do Zoom calls right now with my meetings and stuff, it's like, I'm just warning you, my kids are gonna make a cameo. They may not have clothes on either. Like, I'll put them in the bathtub. I'm like, you guys just hang out in the bathtub. I'm gonna do a Zoom call, and then I'm like, I can hear the water draining from the tub down the pipes. I'm like, any second now they're coming downstairs. So
Yep.
But
well, I've got a couple more questions, and then I'll finally let you go.
Okay.
I've taken
okay.
up.
Cool.
So, one question is that, like, so we talked about you've got all these short films you're making while you're making all these features, and they have shoestring-ish budgets that you've magically gotten for shorts, which is crazy to me because, like you said, they make no money. I guess, what is the strategy in that? As a person that's also, like, making films, I started making shorts to throw them on YouTube to try to keep getting traction. Is that kind of, where did it come from?
So I like playing the film festival game a lot. I love playing my films at horror festivals. And it's one of those things where you develop a fan base throughout the years doing these film festivals, and the features take so long to make.
Yeah.
So you don't want, it's just one of those things where you don't want people to forget about you. You know, it's just true. You just want, and I'll be honest with you, for me, short films are very important in strengthening your storytelling abilities too, because you have to tell a story in a specific amount of time. And so I do that for that. I make short films for that reason, and it just keeps keeping my work out there. And also it allows me to work with new crews, new actors, that then I will then put in a feature. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that makes total sense. My dumb, like, I don't know, idea was like, well, Patrick Rea is too, like, big to need to be making these shorts. Like, he can just, like, make all his features, you know? Like,
well, part of it is I just like doing it. And
that's
I
awesome.
always tell people, I'm like, I love making short films, and it allows people to watch something for 10 minutes and, you know, and check in, check out really fast. And in the meantime, I'm trying to desperately try to get the next feature off the ground. So, because otherwise you do get very creatively frustrated, you know, like you can, you know, between projects, you're like, well, this specific film I thought was going to happen and now it's not, but at least I have this short film I can kind of focus my creative energy on, and get it out there and keep my name going with the film festivals. And that way, when there's a feature ready, because these film festivals are always waiting for your next feature. So they're like, oh, you know, keep getting the shorts out there to keep them, you know, stay in the forefront of their minds.
I mean, like, yeah, we've definitely used them to, like, be a way to introduce ourselves to a festival, because, like, they only accept 6 features, let's say, but they accept 150 shorts.
Yes.
So your chances are bigger. And then once you've met them, you're like, yeah, I also have these great features that are in a similar style. And they're like, oh, well, send us one of those next year. And you're like, all right, perfect. And that's how you kind of get your foot in that door.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a game in that regard, but it's fun. And I mean, and I, like, for me, like, I've gotten to work with a lot of cool new people doing short films. And it's like, if those times of my life were spent just developing a feature, I feel like I don't know. So for me, like, making short films, I will probably always do it. And unless for some reason I get on a project that's going to definitely take me 10 years and keep me busy for 10 years. And so I will most likely always be making because I do get criticized for that every now and then. They're like, well, why are you making short films when you could be just making features? And I'm like, well, I am working on a feature. It's taking a lot of time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I got to raise the money. And so, you know,
There's zero criticism for me. I was just curious.
No, I know. It's funny. I know. It's just funny. I get asked the question. They're like, well, why are you still doing shorts? And I'm like, I just like doing them. And I think it's like, if you're putting together, it's like a single instead of an album.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I don't know how else to, and so, yeah. And it also kind of, it's food for the soul in many ways. Cause like, I'd be like, all right, well, nothing's going on with my feature right now, but at least, this one's playing didn't get rejected from this film festival.
Yeah.
So thank God for that, Yeah,
I've really grown to love them as like those little, like, I've got a little thing to put out and people are like, oh, I saw your thing. And like people will watch them quicker than they'll watch a feature because it takes less of their time. And like,
well, and you never know who's going to see it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these producers or financiers don't have 90 minutes to watch your feature. They want to see something quick. So like, for instance, Spiritual Practice, I had a concept for that as a feature before a short. So for once, I actually reverse engineered it as a short. And I was like, all right, I'm going to put this out there. And I've had a lot of people tell me they would like to see that expanded.
Yeah,
into something
I would.
Longer. And the same thing with Fused. I've had several people say, I wish that was a longer movie. I wish that was a feature. So, who knows,
Quick question about Fused.
Go ahead.
Quick, dumb Fused question.
Okay.
Is filming on the streets downtown, was that just super indie, like Run and Gun? Or how much lighting did you do?
I did it outside of Tapcade, and I was also doing some editing work for the Vow Exchange, and they're both connected. So the Vow Exchange and Tapcade were like two buildings.
I know. Yeah, I knew where they were, and I knew exactly where you were. I saw it. I was like, that's Tapcade. Like,
yeah. So I just we just did it. We just did it. And
Got it.
I knew that if I knew that those two businesses weren't going to complain, so we just did it. And
so it's pretty Run and Gun.
Behind Tapcade, yeah.
Got it.
Nobody cared, and it was one of those things where like I talked to Adam Roberts beforehand, and I talked to the owner of the Vow Exchange, and I was just like, I'm going to be in your alleyway. He didn't care.
It looked gorgeous, and I was like, man, I want to know how indie that was, or like if they like really like shut the street down, or you know what I mean, like set up lights.
Very indie, and I mean, same thing for like the scene with the jogger. That was like 15 degrees, and I made my wife run up the street as a jogger, poor girl. We just kind of wait. And if I see a cop, I'm like, oh crap, get the camera back in the car. Let's go.
I love that you're still that indie in ways. That makes me really.
But with I Am Lisa, it was a little different. So
yeah.
I ended up, because we were doing drone shots and we were doing a bunch of stuff. I told the police what we were doing. And I wanted their,
approval.
A few things. I would, so it was that one. I was I tried to be as careful as possible and took care of the red tape for that one. But for some of these shorts, it's like, okay, get out of the car. Let's get this really quick.
It's Run and Gun. I love that.
Right.
That's great. All right. So I got my last two questions.
Okey-doke.
Number one is, I've started asking everybody, because like we're all filmmakers, we're all artists. I'm just intrigued. What are you watching? What are you reading? What art are you taking in right now?
I'm a huge Mandalorian fan, but I'm sure you're not surprised by that.
Isn't everyone? Like,
yeah, like in fact, I keep saying I'm like, well, I just got to get to Friday so I can watch the next episode. I've been watching. I watch a lot of true crime. I watch a ton of true crime, and so whenever there's a new true crime show, I'm on that. Like Netflix is my thing for that. I've been watching the Heaven's Gate one on HBO Max, which is a 4-part series about a cult. That whole thing, it was a mass suicide, happened in the late 90s when I was in high school, and I remember being intrigued by it. I was always I'm destined to make a horror movie about a cult. It hasn't happened yet, because nothing scares me more than that for me.
I mean, like, I watched The Vow and I was like, this is crazy. Like, the
NXIVM thing is terrifying.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's insane.
It's insane. And we've been watching the Leah Remini show about Scientology.
I need to check that out.
Yeah. And then trying to think what else I watch a lot of, like I said, I watch a lot of horror movies on top of you know, and I watch a lot of older horror movies. Like I try to find stuff that I try to seek out things I haven't seen from the early 80s. I don't know why the early 80s, late 70s is kind of a sweet spot for me.
What
And
have you seen recently?
I watched a Italian horror movie called A Blade in the Dark.
Okay.
I watched that. I have Shudder, which is a streaming service.
I know what Shudder is. Yeah.
Yeah, it just plays horror.
It's
horror
the
content,
streaming service I don't want at all. No.
Yes. And so I've been watching stuff on that, and I'm always trying to discover new horror movies that I haven't seen before. And every now and then I'm like, oh my God, there's a Thanksgiving themed horror movie that I've never seen. Let's watch it.
Yeah.
You know, things like that. But yeah, when it's not that, it's documentaries or true crime or yeah, I actually did I worked on a segment of a show that's going to be on the ID network, which is a true crime channel. Over the summer, I did an interview that's going to be on some episode that's going to be a true crime show. So that was like, I was like fanboying out because I was just like, yes, finally I get to work on a true crime show. So yeah, I do watch a lot of stuff like that, and I don't know why, other than it's just intriguing to me.
Yeah.
So
cool. And then my last question for you is, if you could give yourself, like before starting all this, a piece of advice, and or somebody else who's looking at a similar career path as you, a piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
I mean, understand the business side of things. I know they don't teach. They don't really teach you about distribution in film school, and I feel like distribution is something. I mean, I'm always learning. I've been through it now 4 times, and I'm always. It's a constant. I always tell people it's elation and disappointment at the same time. It's like you're excited, but yet at the same time, it's you know, there are things about this distribution that no one tells you until you're there. And so I feel like if I wish there was a course that KU would teach, it would be something about distribution.
So I'll ask the dumb question then, like, what's a thing that you wish someone had told you about distribution as a filmmaker who's like only self-distributed and just like doesn't feel like I understand how to even get to that step? Like, what is the thing that you wish you would have known or could tell some dummy like me?
I mean, there are things that you wish that you could control better. Like, for instance, like now it's funny because the distribution process for I Am Lisa, it's like, oh, okay, 4th time's a charm. Now I'm starting to really like find ways to keep a little bit of control over, or at least be in the conversation for, like, obviously with Enclosure.
Yeah, you lost your title.
Right. Luckily, they didn't change the movie. They just changed the title. And I always say it could be worse. It could be worse. They could have decided this movie needs more nudity. We're going to throw some naked camper in the middle of the movie. So, I mean, be cognizant of things like titles, poster art. There are things that you just can't control sometimes. I remember when I saw the Nail Biter poster for the first time that they were going to put in the red box, and I was just like, wow, that's not at all what I was expecting, or I don't like it, but I got over it. And it's funny because with Enclosure, it was like they changed the title to a title I didn't like, but then knocked it out of the ballpark with the poster.
The poster's incredible.
It's I have it framed. I'm like, I love the poster. So you know, those are things, and you have to be looking at different trends because they do affect you. Like, the reason why they changed the title was because at that point VOD was alphabetical. Now it doesn't really matter because of everything's streaming services. But in 2017, which is only 3 short years away, which seems like an eternity ago, everything was alphabetized. So when movies were on VOD, A's got more views. They explained it to me. The A titles got made like hundreds of thousands of dollars more than E or anything later. And they said, well, even if if you could put a number in front of it, it's even higher up in the because they put the number. I'm like, what are you thinking? Like, what do we call it? Like 1, 2,
3 days in the wood.
I mean, hashtag Enclosure. So those are the things you're like, I didn't even anticipate that.
Yeah.
You know? So be aware of those trends because they do affect you in some capacity. And like try to keep yourself in the conversation with artwork, because otherwise they'll just make a poster and they'll be like, this is your poster. So with I and Lisa, the new poster that they put out, because we had artwork made, it was hand-drawn artwork.
Yeah.
And I was super thrilled with it. And I was very happy with it. But I knew that when we got to the actual distro part of things, that was going to change, because that just, those posters don't necessarily sell in the mainstream.
Yeah.
So they create a more mainstream looking poster, which will be for the red box. But then there's going to be a different poster art, cover art, when it's in the Walmart shelf that we don't have any say in. So it's like this very like, yeah, there's a tug of war, and you just have to know what hills you want to die on in that regard. But always just kind of be aware that the distribution process can be disheartening at times, and you just have to be very careful. Have a lawyer, look over the contracts, and make sure that you've not signed away your movie for 1,000 years. And there are just some things that you just need to learn, and I think that in some ways distribution is a necessary evil. I mean, unless you have the money to self-distribute your own movie, you have to go with a distributor.
Yeah. So that's
go ahead.
That's a dumb question, I guess I'll ask. Is that like, do you have a distributor you work with every time? Do you have a connection, or do you have like a agent that sends to distributors, or have you just?
Well, now it's interesting because like the sales agent distribution model, the sales agent and the distributor, it's becoming a little bit more like the lines are being blurred, maybe.
Okay.
I've gone with a different one each time, and again, like, and I would go back to some of the other ones again, like it just this time through various connections we got this distributor interested, and I felt good about it. Something told me that it was a good decision. I went with my gut. And so, each time is a little bit different, and you usually have to have a sales agent kind of negotiate. And so right now the distributor we have is also acting as a sales agent and selling our movie to different countries. So we've sold I Am Lisa to the UK, and it'll be coming out through a distributor in the UK. They just sold Canada. And so, you just kind of have to play the game, and I always tell people, when you have a distributor, check in on them. Don't I'm emailing them constantly, and they probably get really annoyed with me, but that's just the way you have to be. Otherwise, I remember the first time Nailbiter was on TV, I just happened across it. Like I was just
wow.
What? I'm like, what? They didn't tell me. So like it was this weird thing where all of a sudden it was showing on Chiller, which was a channel that NBC Universal owned. It was a horror channel, and it was just playing like a couple times a month on the channel. And it was weird seeing my movie edited for television, by the way, because they like blurred out certain things that were weird, and then they like censored out some of the profanity. But it was like they blurred out in the movie the girl is sending text messages, and her screen is a hand flipping the bird with the text message. So they blurred the entire screen, which text messages are important to the plot. So like people were commenting on Twitter, they're like, well, what is she saying? Because they blurred out the text messages. I was like, well, and so at one point I participated in like a viewing thing with Chiller where they could ask me questions while the movie aired. And they're like, what is it the text message say? And I'm like, this is what it says. And so they were like, okay, that would be nice to know. But yeah, it's an interesting distribution is an interesting animal. And again, like I had no idea, film school only really teaches you the basics of production. And I think that it would be nice to have a class that just focuses on distribution, because ultimately that's the goal. You want to get your movie out there.
Yeah.
To be seen, and that's the reason you make a movie. So, and it's interesting because, like, okay, and I'm going to be very transparent. When Nailbiter came out, we ended up selling to a subdivision of Lionsgate, and so they gave us a set amount of money up front, and then they went and sold it to television in Redbox and then kept all the money for that.
Got it.
So you don't see any of that. Now, with the way we're doing things with I Am Lisa, we're coming out in the Redbox, but those sales we're participating in. You know what I'm saying? Like we're seeing some money. So, those are the things. Again, I feel like I could talk about that stuff for hours and such, but it can be very frustrating. And you just have to keep a good sense of humor and stay in communication with them at all times,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I super appreciate your time and talking to me.
Great. Awesome, man. Take care. And I will talk to you on Facebook or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. All right. Take care.
Bye. See, I really could. I could just keep talking to him. I could talk to him for forever. We even did talk longer after that. That's recorded, but I don't, it's not for you. That's just for me. He's a wonderful guy. I'm so glad I finally got to talk to him. I've looked up to him as a filmmaker for a long time. Glad you got to hear all that wonderful advice, all those great antidotes. Anecdotes? Oh, well, that's fine. Anecdotes. You got to hear all those great anecdotes. Like I said, the pod is leaving SoundCloud. It shouldn't affect you unless you're a SoundCloud person. And we've got the new podcast, First Timers Movie Club, coming soon. Thank you so much. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe. Have a good holidays. Love you guys.